Hello there. In this video, we're going to look at how you can create a custom SQL test. We'll start by looking at it from the candidate's perspective, and then we will show you how you can create the same problem on your own. All right, so this is a SQL test where you can see on the left the problem statement, the SQL editor if you want, and the output, right? So the problem statement is that you have two tables, authors and books, very simple structure, just int ID and a name to the author, and again an int ID and title to the books along with an author ID as a foreign key. And the candidate is expected to basically write an SQL query that returns all book titles along with their author names, and the output should be sorted alphabetically by the book title, right? All this is marked down, as you will see later. We have an example as well. So there's an example with a few authors, their books, and the corresponding author ID. And the expected output is basically this, right? So you can see the title is sorted alphabetically, G, M, W, and so on. The author name is also there in each row. As you mentioned here, the different fields within a row are separated by the pipe symbol, right? So the candidate is basically just supposed to write query that returns the fields. The pipe symbol here is written explicitly because the platform returns the pipe symbol as a way to separate fields within a row, right? So if I were to write this, solve this, then I have the code with me. So this is one way you could solve it. You could say select the fields that you need and join the tables on the foreign key, and you order by the title. All right. Let me run the test. And you see that the test passes. There's a green tick, and you can say read more, and then you will see there's an exact character to character match between the expected output and the output generated by the query. All right. One thing you will notice is whatever you give as the name of the column doesn't show up. So the output only has the list of records and it does not have the name of the column. And which is also why the expected output doesn't, right? The generated output does not have the column name, and so you should not have that in the expected output. Okay, so obviously if you made a small change here, it's quite likely you'll get wrong answer. And so this is how you test the candidate for their SQL writing skills. All right, so how would you create a problem like this? When you're creating a programming challenge, a coding challenge, this is the interface that you would see. So let's give it a title, books and authors. This is a SQL test. You can ignore the GitHub URL. For the problem name, you can basically just copy this. All right. The problem statement, I have it handy. Let me just copy paste that. Again, the problem statement is just marked down. It's free text, so you could write whatever you want, right? Obviously, write something sensible, but you could write whatever you want. The next section is the user boilerplate. This is just the starter code that the candidate would see. So when we loaded the test, we only had this, write the query here directly, right? And so you can, it can literally just be this, right? So you can leave it empty if you want, or if you even want to provide them with a hint, maybe have one or two lines of code, you could do that. So this is just what the candidate will see when they load the test. So all this is fairly straightforward. Now comes the core of creating the SQL test, schema queries. The way the SQL test works is every time you run the test, so when this, just before this query is executed, we actually create a table. So we define the schema, create a table, then we insert data into it, and we then execute this query against that input, right? So against the table. The schema query is basically where you create the table. So again, I have this handy. So here you're creating two tables, authors exactly the same schema as we saw in the markdown. um, and that's basically it, right? So all the structure, the SQL structure, you will insert into the schema queries. Now, test cases, the way these work is each test case is basically some data being inserted into the table, and then when the query has to be executed, it is executed against that data, right? So here, as a sample test case, I could write something like this. I'll explain this now, and this is the output. So in this sample test case, you're inserting into the table certain values, inserting the books, certain other values. Of course, this has to be correct data, valid data, because you can't insert author ID 10. There is no author ID 10. It will complain, right? So see to it that this is valid data. And if you had these two tables, then this is the unique output you should get when you run. I mean, basically, for the problem statement, this is the output you should get. You will notice that the output has the pipe symbol, right? So if you go back here, you are returning two fields, the author name and the book title. Obviously, it's SQL, so there's a comma, but uh, the way the platform works is you want to separate the fields in a given row with a pipe symbol with no space around the pipe symbol, right? So this basically means it's field 1, field 2 in row 1, and so on. And you separate the rows with just a new line. So you get this, and you press the enter key, and then you get a new line. So rows are separated by pipe, and columns are separated by the pipe symbol, and rows are separated by a new line. Okay. Again, if just so that you understand, when with this query I click on run tests, our platform creates a table for each test case. It creates a table, inserts this data into the table, runs the query, and then the query's output is compared character by character with the expected output. And if it's a match, then the test case is deemed to have passed, right? So the sample test case, you could insert a real test case. It would be very similar to what we just did, just the data are different, and because the data are different, the output is also different. So again, you're inserting a few other authors, these are their books, and this is the output. And that's basically it. I mean, you can change other settings, but that is, again, the core of the SQL test is what do you use to, how do you create the table? So the schema queries, and each test case is basically inserting data into the table and specifying what the output would be. The main point to note is, again, if you have just if you're returning a single column, right? If we were asking them to return only the books by the sort of alphabetically, then you don't have to worry about the pipe symbol at all. It would just be a Clash of Kings, a Game of Thrones, and so on. But if you have multiple columns, separate them with a pipe symbol, and the different rows are separated by a new line character. Well, not a new line character, but basically by a new line.